Hi, I'm Mike from Mike Migas Production, and this is the first video in a series that I'll call Podcast Report, where I'll be going through latest news and updates from podcasting industry. Things like platform developments, content updates, latest trends, anything newsworthy. Now, that's the first video of its kind, so we'll see how it goes. But if you want to be up to date, hit that subscribe and thumbs up button. The news are until 26th of April 2020. So if anything happened in the meantime, that's why I didn't include that. Hi, I'm Mike Migas, producer of a popular true crime podcast Case File, and today I'll be going through the latest podcasting news. Let's get to it. First, let's address the lockdowns and quarantine. Now, this depends from country to country, but I'm based in England, and in here we are pretty much advised to stay at home. Some people are being furloughed, which means government pay their wages to not work. Some people do work remotely, and some businesses are folding. How does that affect podcasting world? Because the similar situation is happening all around the world. Now, I've been tracking news about that for the last few weeks from different sources, and I'm getting mixed messages because coming from my own experience, from the podcast that I produced, Case File True Crime, we've seen a drop in listens and downloads. And the significant drop happened when the lockdowns were announced, and that was mid to end of March. Now, a few weeks later, downloads, streams, listens are still much slower than they were before the lockdowns. However, when we look at the Voxnest reports, it seems that podcast listens are growing. So, who to believe? Now, they make a good point that the podcast listenership is down in USA, America, where podcast listens are correlated to people commuting to work. And it kind of makes sense because if you're on a tube or using public transport or you're driving a car, it's very easy to pop in that podcast to pass the time. However, now that you're staying at home and people are working from home, it's much more difficult to find that me time when you sit down in quiet and listen to podcasts, especially if there are other people in the house as well. They've also said that instead of sort of morning, evening times during the week when the podcast listens spiked, the habit of podcast listening changed to evenings during weekends. So that's interesting. That kind of change of times where people tune in to their favorite podcasts. Now, will the effects persist? Will everything go back to normal? I think we'll find out in time, but I will keep you updated. Moving on, we'll look at podcast ads. Let's say the lockdowns ease up and the listenership stabilizes, the numbers are on the up again, maybe not in the US, maybe somewhere else in Europe, other parts of the world. However, the global pandemic affected the whole economy, and that means companies are making cuts, and that means they're slashing their marketing, their ads budgets. Now, ads are the bedrock of podcasting industry. Personally, I've seen the effects of that already with some advertisers slashing their budgets or even going back on their previous commitments. Now, AdExchanger writes that some companies that revoked their budgets initially are now coming back, however, with different messaging, with different copy. Companies that sell home goods or things that connect with that remote working may up their spending. However, the article also highlights that some advertisers may stick only to big shows and big podcasting networks, because right now no one wants to take the risks. And that's obviously not a great news for independent and smaller podcasters. DigiDay also make a similar point. It's more about changing that message and adjusting to a new reality, but the initial reaction is definitely tough. Magellan also published a list of industries that up their podcasting spend. And just having a glance at the article, you'll see that hobbies, home goods, mental health, and alcohol are doubling down on marketing. So there you go. Still, that doesn't sway people away from starting podcasts, because a lot of people are staying at home, they have a little bit more time to experiment with ideas, maybe begin something new. And Apple just announced that now they publish over 1 million shows in more than 100 languages and 175 countries and regions around the world. So there isn't a lack of ideas. And the space, at least from the content perspective, will benefit in the long term. And that means that when that situation passes, there's still a lot of interesting things happening. And hopefully podcasting space will continue to grow. And hopefully new podcasters won't start coronavirus-related shows too. Not that there's something wrong with that, of course. A report from Rager says, in the UK, 18% of British adults, and that's over 10.1 million people, now listen to podcasts every week. Now that's according to new audio measurement data. Podcasts are now more popular than CDs or people's own MP3 music collections. That's according to their study again. However, apparently that research was done in February, so before the quarantine, before the lockdowns happened. It'd be interesting to see how the numbers stack up now, if there's any changes. I've been doing this for a few years now, and I definitely see that growth in the UK market, the market that wants to chase the USA, who are still the leaders in podcasting space. Okay, let's finish with some non-lockdown related news. It's now kinda obvious that Spotify is betting big on podcasting with acquisitions and marketing campaigns. They want to solve that problem of podcast discoverability, and they're trying a few different things. Now, hot pod news right. Spotify is testing out a profile pages for podcasting hosts, and that's similar to band pages on Spotify, if you're familiar with that. And that's an interesting development, and it may raise awareness for some shows. The more exciting news, in my opinion, is the launch of curated podcast playlists. Now, I love Spotify playlists, and I use them all the time when I want to discover new artists. So they're trying the same strategy, but with podcasts now. And according to Spotify Newsroom, they've launched in a few different countries: US, Germany, Sweden, UK, Mexico, and Brazil. And they've launched 3 flagship playlists: Best Podcast of the Week, Crime Scene, and Brain Snacks. And all these playlists will be curated by humans, real-life humans. Now, I wonder how this will affect podcast discovery, because people who listen to podcasts are used to creating their own playlists with their favorite shows. Or maybe Spotify playlists are targeting new listeners. Who knows, we'll see in time. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I did check out that crime playlist in the UK, and Case File True Crime, which I produce, was included on the first spot on that playlist, which makes me happy. Looking at my notes, I think that's it for today. So let me know if you enjoyed this video, if the news were alright, or maybe I should be focusing on something else, some different topics. I don't know. Comment below. I'm Mike from Mike Migas Production. Share, like, subscribe, and I'll see you later.